All right, everyone, thank you for your patience. Once again, my name is Ian Schaefer, and today we're going to be taking a look at one of the best kept secrets in ConstructionSuite, and that's the workflow. I'm actually thrilled that we're going over this today because the workflow is my favorite feature. For any of you guys who have been around for using the ConstructionSuite product family or the UDA in general, or if you've ever attended any of my webinars in the past, I'm sure you've heard me say this. Workflows are one of the best tools that you guys can use in the ConstructionSuite software. It outlines everything within the ConstructionSuite system that you'll need to touch on, and it provides a clear, bulleted list for that process that you want everybody to cover. Workflows are spectacular for growing companies. They allow you to create the outline for everything that you need to create for your projects. You're outlining the step-by-step for everything that you want the new people to do, so there's less questions for them to come back to you about. They're also exceptional for anybody who's got an established company as well. Some of us, once we start to get a little complacent due to our success or our familiarity with the system, we tend to skip steps. With the workflow in place, there's that active reminder to make sure that you don't miss anything important. And today we're going to take a look at where you find them, how to customize them, and some of the adjustments that can be made. Now, before we dive into that, again, a little context about this. I'm Ian Schaefer, one of the senior product specialists at UDA Technologies. UDA Technologies has provided solutions for a number of years. I think ConstructionSuite has been available since 2006. That was when we first released ConstructionSuite. We actually had workflows available before that, though. And we've been kind of refining that workflow idea since 2000. I think they were first available in Construction Office 2001, I think, was when they first showed up. Back in 99 and 2000, the Construction Office product family had great estimate templates, great reports and contracts, and some excellent contact management tools, but it didn't really have some of those fundamental underlying tools until a little later. Conveniently, we've had plenty of time to refocus and refine those, so we'll be taking a look at those today. Now, to add to our team today, we've actually got my colleague Jordan Davis joining me for the webinar itself. Jordan is one of our top product specialists here at UDA as well, and he's going to be fielding some of the questions that come through and making sure to touch on some of these things that I might forget. He's got his own workflow over here that he's going to follow along with. I also have Sydney Dorsey, I believe, handling questions today. So if you guys have already found that questions panel, or if you guys do find it as we're going through the webinar, make sure you send those questions in. Even if it's just comments about how much you love the things that we're talking about, we love to see those too. But send in those questions. We'll make sure to cover them as we go. Now, it does look like we've got a great mix of builders today. We've got residential builders and a few remodelers. We've got commercial builders. It even looks like we've got some government contractors here as well. One that I think works with military bases. The beauty of this is these workflows that we're taking a look at are universal. You guys can set up workflows for different types of jobs to help link to the right contracts for those jobs or the right estimates. All of this information is going to be readily available for you, and it's all going to be customizable as well. My expectation is the workflows will evolve as you refine your steps through the process and everything that you're working on. Now, of course, most important, step one. Let's go take a look at a project and find those workflows. Now, the easiest place to find them is to go to one of your recent projects here in ConstructionSuite and take a look at the tabs along the top for your projects. Along the top of each of your projects from the Summary tab, you will find important features like the projects list itself, the summary for the projects, the project files and history, and you'll be able to go look at a correspondence overview for any of you working with the commercial versions of ConstructionSuite. What we're looking for in this case is actually smack dab in the middle. There's our Workflow tab, and when you click into the Workflow tab, it gives you a great overview for where we stand on each project. Again, with all of our major features grouped at a high level, with the substructure in here for all the tasks that are required to complete that phase of the workflow. Now, in this workflow, for example, the phases that we've created for this are entering bids into the database, reviewing bids, pre-construction, construction, create schedule, create specs, and closing. As you can see, this one in particular seems a little out of order. And as you're working through this, you'll be able to see what we're looking at down here and rearrange it from here as well. Now, each of these workflows that we're looking at is actually specific to an individual job, but you'll have templates that we'll take a look at in a little bit. Based on the project types, those project types are going to be defining what starts in this workflow. From there, you can always come into and customize workflows by right-clicking and adding items using the new workflow item, editing the existing ones, maybe there's a typo in the name, or deleting the existing ones as well. So I'm going to take just a moment to clean this one up. And it may turn into something, again, about like this. You'll notice that there's also options to move items up and down or rearrange positioning in these. The positioning that you'll find for a lot of these workflow items is important because, again, if you're inserting or rearranging some of these tasks, sometimes it's easiest to move it out of the existing phase and into another phase sometime later. Like here, we pushed Create Schedule up to add it to another list. We'll do the same thing here as well. Move it up, right-click and indent, and now it's a part of pre-construction. Now, for those of you who have actually joined us for the first 2 webinars in this series, this functionality that I'm doing right now, right-clicking and deleting, right-click, move up and down, indent, outdent, these are very familiar functions in ConstructionSuite. We provide these tools throughout. For the estimating webinar that we hosted maybe 2 weeks ago. Yep. The estimating webinar, of course, any of the edits that you wanted to do to your estimates or your estimate templates, you can right-click, move the items around. Schedules are the same way. Now, granted, we took the opportunity to create the schedule from the estimate, so most of the structure was already provided. But again, if you need to rearrange, right-click and move around. For the workflows, same tools. Right-click, move up, move down, indent, outdent. And as you're building these, the right-click menu is going to be consistent both here and in the template modification system. Now again, aside from making some of the customizations here to make sure that everything looks the way I want it to look, you'll also find that within each phase there are various different sub-steps. Some of these can have sub-sub-steps as well. The idea with the structure for the workflow itself is you're basically creating these phases or stages that you might be following in your project, and then adding all the steps to see that stage to completion. The idea here for pre-construction, again, is we need to make sure that the client gets entered in, that we get the options selected, that we create a contract package to make sure that everything gets signed up for and set up correctly. We can make sure that the agreement gets signed, of course, awarding bids, setting up a schedule and specs. All of this is part of it. And as you go through and look at all the information available within it, you'll be able to check off each of the individual tasks and track progress happening up along the top. Again, each one of these counts for an equal part of the project, so if you've got big steps, it's a great idea to go ahead and break those out into various different sub-steps. And again, the idea with these workflows, or if you're using any of our standard workflows, is we want to try to make sure that all the important steps for the projects are included within the workflow itself.
I want to chime in here and get ahead of a question that our clients, I've fielded this question a few times now. It's a common question. How are workflows different from schedules?
That's a great question, Jordan. And it's an important one too, because that comes up as you're putting together your workflows. The primary difference between your workflow and the schedule is the location you're doing the work. So the schedules, for example, that's going to be everything that happens on a job site. Or happens supporting the job site or hitting the job site. We're talking about going and doing the installations or the demo work, maybe scheduling material deliveries or inspections or walkthroughs with your customer for a punch list. All of that is going to be very schedule specific. In the workflow, you're providing steps in here primarily for in-office work to make sure that all the documentation is done. I love the workflows that some of our clients create that include things like building the handoff package, so that the sales rep can actually put together and include all the different documentation that the project manager wants. This is an excellent step or an excellent phase in a lot of workflows. You'll tend to see this as a kind of a pre-sales portion up above. It's perfect because then you're bulleting out everything the project manager wants and you're streamlining that handoff. Now again, it doesn't happen on site. It could, I guess, the meeting could be there, but the idea or the concept behind the workflow is this is all of the background supporting information that needs to be created so that the job site can happen. And so again, most of our items here are things like entering the client information, signing a contract or creating a contract, creating a schedule. All of these, you want to have a keyboard and a mouse, or maybe you're going to work off of an iPad, especially now with the AWS hosting services that we provide. You can do it from anything, but it's best done when you're sitting down, looking at it really. Still, great question and an important one because again, each project that you look at is going to have its own workflow. And within these workflows, you've got that guideline for everything that needs to happen. It also helps you track what's been done and what hasn't. Now in my case, for this particular data set, we've got about 10 projects in the system. If I were managing these all by myself, then I would need to be able to keep up with 10 different projects and their progress individually. Again, it could be done. Something like a workflow enables me to see exactly where I left off with each project without mixing up jobs. I might remember where I was for lot 185. I might think that's where I was for lot 187, and I might skip steps as a result. Well, in this case, that's never going to be an issue because all we need to do in this case, just go to lot 187 Baldwin Park, click back into the workflow tab, and here they are. If I needed to go back to lot 185, click back to lot 185, dive into the workflow, and we haven't even started. So again, in this case, as you're kind of working your way through these workflows, the primary concept is put everything into the workflow that you want to get done, especially in Office. Any paperwork, any documentation, all of this needs to be available as a step in the workflow, and then you can just kind of build it out as you go from here. Now you'll notice too, as we get further and further down in the workflows themselves, all of our pre-built workflows include 4 major phases: planning, pre-construction, construction, which I highly suspect people are going to be duplicating for each major phase of construction, and closing. The idea with this is we found a formula that works for our projects, and we want to repeat that on each of our projects. In the planning phase, again, this is all set up. Pre-construction is providing the documentation. Once it gets to the job site, all of the construction steps are, to the question you asked earlier, Jordan, not specific to a schedule. Most of this is, again, supporting information. So we're looking at issuing work orders and sending them out, ordering materials, making sure that the draw requests get put together, especially if they're AIA G702 or G703, which are available within the system. All of these are the steps in Office that we need to make sure get done to support our guys on the job site who are working off of the schedule. Now, once you get to the end of the project, again, finishing up that final inspection doesn't mean the job is done. So every single one of these default workflows that we provide includes a closing phase where we do the final inspection, a walkthrough with the client, and then close out all of our paperwork for the job as well. These steps usually include things like tracking our final payments, doing I've heard it called a number of different things, but something along the lines of a job autopsy, reviewing to make sure that the estimate versus actuals looks good, that we had the right kind of estimated numbers, and we didn't go crazy with change orders or anything like that, or maybe we did and tracked them all. Ultimately, this closing phase in the workflow should always document everything that you guys have to get done for your jobs, especially if you have any additional requirements or overhead provided through maybe a GC or a government contract that you guys work with. All the extra paperwork has to be included. Let's make sure that it makes it into the workflow as well, just to verify every time that it gets done. Now again, the questions come up, how does this help us make money? And ultimately, that's the big question about everything that we use. And our primary focus with generating these workflows was to not only bullet out everything that needs to get done and make sure that we track responsibility or hold people accountable for what they're supposed to get done, it also works as an effective reminder for everything coming up. If we want to prepare for everything ahead of time so that everything is set up and ready when it needs to happen, the workflow is an ideal tool for that. Again, on the skipping steps front, if we go down to the construction phase in the workflow, we have bullet points in here for everything from issuing purchase orders to verify that we get all the right materials on site, to identifying change orders and filling out contracts and paperwork, even going into and updating the schedule. We put all these steps in there, regardless of whether or not you remember to do them. They're here so that you can verify that it's done. And as a reminder that these things need to be done so that we don't end up with a hiccup at the end of the project, where maybe one of the subcontractors forgot to release his lien on the project, and here we are trying to hand it off or sell it, and the whole thing is delayed a couple of weeks. That affects cash flow, something we talked about last week. But in this case, prepping all these steps, making sure that it's well documented, means that those hang-ups never happen anymore. So again, working with these workflows, it's an ideal way to make sure that you guys don't get surprise hang-ups at the end of your job. Document everything, and then you don't have those. You don't have to worry about it. I did mention earlier that each of these workflows is going to be unique for each project. So as you're looking through these projects, you'll find that each one is going to have similar workflows, but what you might notice is that most of these are based on the same collection of workflows. Now, to find those collections, take a look up in the Tools menu, switch over to the Construction Suite options, and when you take a look at your project types, you'll find all of the workflows available based on the types of jobs that you're working on here. Now, by default, I believe most of you should have, in the very least, a residential project type, a production building project type, maybe a single-story dwelling. For the commercial users, you might have commercial in here as well. For green builders, you might have a green workflow as well, which is going to include about 8 times as many inspections and some additional paperwork that needs to be filled out. But ultimately, what you'll find is these project types drive the workflows. And the idea is each type of job, each overall type of project is slightly different, has different requirements, and so the workflows for them will be slightly different to accommodate for this. Now again, if you guys are working through these, select your type, and then you'll find the Workflow tab includes everything that we need in order to succeed on this type of project. Just like we talked about on the primary workflow for a project, from here you can right-click to create new workflow items, edit the existing workflow items, delete them, or rearrange, moving up and down, indenting and outdenting. And the idea with most of this is, even if you start from scratch, you can create all of your primary categories or your primary phases for the workflow, and then fill them out with all the steps. From here, in order to optimize your work, we also have collapsible menus available to make sure that as you're looking through this, you can bullet out all the steps, and then collapse down that phase when it's done to move on to the next one. Again, space is an important resource here, so we want to make sure that you can make the most of it. So again, as we're working through this, collapse down what you're working on if it's done, expand it out if it's not. Use the right-click menu to add or edit where needed. Now, the other thing that you'll find in this case is when you are right-clicking to edit any of these workflow items or creating new ones, you'll be able to enter in the workflow item name and then assign actions to them. Now, these actions are important because, once again, it saves you steps, and it guides some of your newer team members, who we call the junior green assistants sometimes. These new team members need to know which file to use, and the easiest way to make sure that they're using the right one is to just link it in the workflow directly to the template that they're supposed to open. This is especially important when you come back to and start taking a look at things like creating the estimate. We may have created an estimate template that's specific for commercial projects. So in here, I'll edit the Create Estimate step in the workflow. We want to launch a template. From the Launch Template section, we're going to open up the estimating collection, go to the commercial folders, and then use the commercial master perhaps. Now what this means is whenever, you can see that it's recently been edited here, whenever we hover over the item, it's going to tell us what we're doing. When it becomes a part of the workflow, you'll have an action item or a button to the right that when you click on this, it actually performs that step. Again, huge time saving because now you've got one place to find everything that you need. You don't have to go to the estimating section, find the right template, or open the wizard. You just click on the link. You don't have to go to the collection of contracts that we have. Some of you probably have over 200 different contract and document templates, depending on your versions. You don't have to go you don't have to sift through that list to find the right one, set it up in the workflow ahead of time, and again, huge time-saving opportunities by clicking in and selecting all of these functions. You'll also notice as we get a little bit further down that you may have some steps in here as well, like generating takeoffs. If you're working with this step under generating takeoffs, you may want to link this to a program that you have installed on your computer. For those of you using the Premier or Catalyst versions of ConstructionSuite and above, we know that ConstructionSuite has the ability to integrate with programs like, what do we have? We've got PlanSwift and eTakeoff and SoftPlan, Chief Architect, AutoCAD, Revit, Stack, several more. And ultimately, all of those require some work in their program, and then you take that work that you've invested in theirs, and you just push it over to ours. In some case, like PlanSwift, there's even just a single button that you have to push to get an on-cost estimate. What we're providing here is an easy way to live within this project and find everything that you need right here. Now, we might not have provided it for you, but we do give you a really, really easy way to get back into it. And again, all you have to do is just go and select the program you want to run. Usually it'll pull from whatever you might have on your desktop. And this could include programs, again, like PlanSwift or QuickBooks maybe, or eTakeoff, or lately I've been working with a lot of roofers. just happens that way, but Google Earth tends to be a big one for them. We'll get overhead shots for all the projects that we're working on. Yeah, you can link into Google Earth here as well, or if you wanted to go to a website, you could also go straight to Google Maps or something like that if you wanted to get a satellite view from there. All of these are great possibilities. Creating these events on your workflow, once again, just allows you to get where you need to be in as few clicks as possible. I love that option because, again, you're putting these in order step by step and then handing it off to a new staff member who doesn't have to pepper you with questions. It's like the best of all possible training tools in this case because it's a hands-free tool. You give this to them, they know what they need to do, and they can just get out there and execute. And the best part about it is, when you check off these tasks, you can actually see when they're getting done in the project history as well. All of these tasks as they're completed will be date stamped, time stamped. You'll be able to see the contact that's creating them, assuming that you guys have multiple users in your system. All of this information has become, it's not only available in the list, but you can start tracking how long it takes to get these things done. You can see if your guys are actually getting it all taken care of in the right order, or if they just check everything off on Friday. Not that that's everybody's approach, but sometimes it happens. But again, it just gives you better, clearer pictures on how these things fit together. And again, all of this information is available through the workflows, tied into those project types, and you can operate from there. Now again, for those of you who are working on building your workflows, don't forget you can go to the Tools menu, Construction Suite Options, Project Type, and you can find all of those different workflows available here. Some of you may still have the sample workflows that we've provided. Commercial, production building, residential, all of these should be available in the system, and you can see them like so. If you want to make any changes, again, just change whatever you need to change and then click the Save button. You can delete whole sections or duplicate sections or anything. You'll also be able to copy this project into a new project type. Just hit the copy button and you can select the new project type. So if you wanted to duplicate residential and create a remodeling project template, you can do that. Now we've got two types. One is residential, one is a copy as a remodeling project type. And they each have workflows, and they're pretty similar, but this just gives me a starting point to go in and customize the remodeling workflow now for my next one. As you work through this, you'll also be able to create new project types from existing projects. So if you've gone through and completely overhauled one of your existing project workflows, you can use that to create a new one by opening up and selecting this option in the project type selector. This creates a new project type from an existing project. Again, any of the work that you guys have done refining your process, which is, I guess in this case, code for updating your workflow on a job, all that work refining that process can now be reusable so that you guys can push that into a new project moving forward.
See, a question that came in I wanted to highlight. It looks like someone was asking, Ian, how would you actually take this workflow and assign it to a project? Let's say that they build out a really, really great workflow. They set up a new project type. Let's say that it's that remodeling workflow we just set up there, the remodeling project type. How would you actually take that work and bring it into a project?
That's a great question too. Typically, when you're creating your projects in ConstructionSuite, you'll have the option to select the project type here. When you go through and build a brand new project, it'll ask you for a project name. There's an option for a template and a project type. These three as required fields mean that you have to make selections here. Of course, you might not use a project template, and that's okay. But in the very least, you will be selecting a project type. This comes from that list of types. This takes the workflow and applies it to this new project that we're working on. But of course, we don't all have workflows in the system today. Maybe we've got some projects in there that we want to apply an older workflow to, or one of these brand new ones that we're building right now, like that remodeling one that you were talking about a moment ago. In that case, instead of creating a new project, we're actually going to right-click and edit an existing project and just change the project type. Here we could go from a production building to the remodeling project, and this will replace the workflow in the production, or in lot 318 Baldwin Park, with the remodeling workflow in this case instead. And here is where it's actually saying, are you sure you want to overwrite the dimensions in the workflows? I'm going to say, yes, I do. And again, this is now going to take that workflow that we've just invested some of our time in And it's going to apply that to some of the jobs that we've already got underway. Now, of course, the last important step is going into and making sure that everything that's in that workflow is already checked off or applied or what have you. Now, it looks like as you're working through that, there's a couple of common questions that crop up. First and foremost, if the project does have an existing workflow and you want to replace that workflow, that's how you do it. You just edit the project, choose a different project type, and go from there. If you're concerned about losing the existing steps, I would recommend against replacing the workflow because it does completely erase everything and overwrite it. For most of us, though, that's a non-issue because, again, we either have good workflows and we're using them when we're creating new projects, or for a lot of the people that I've worked with, unfortunately, and it pains me to say this, there might be no workflow in place. Everybody is just hoping that they all remember the right steps and assuming that people know what I need in order to execute when I get the job. And again, not the end of the world, but these workflows definitely improve productivity on jobs and streamline teamwork. You've literally told everybody what you want, and they can meet those expectations because they can see it all written out and check it off as they need it. So let's take a look at this point, we'll take a look at some of the other options that you guys have as you're working through some of those workflows. Once again, to get into an existing workflow, all you have to do is open up the project, go up to the workflow tab, and then from here, again, you'll be able to go through and take a look at all the different options that are in the system. As you're working through these, checking them off as you complete the steps, you'll notice progress being made up here on the planning section. Once the whole phase is complete, you can check that off. And for those of you who are looking for it, there's also going to be options to hide any of the information available that you don't need on these workflows, or filter down to specific steps as you're looking through it from here as well. So in this case, if my planning phase is done and I need to focus on pre-construction, click on pre-construction up here at the top, and now I just have that one list. If we needed to shift from pre-construction back to the whole list, you click on it again and it gives you the whole lot. So again, as you're looking through this information, you guys can super focus or expand your focus to a bird's eye view if you need to. And once again, all the different steps with action items are going to be available right here. Now again, the questions are coming up. How do we trigger those actions? Couldn't be easier. As you're looking through the list, all you have to do is just click on the little play button, and up comes the form. In this case, we are entering client contact lead information, so you can type in the box here. This is the exact same form as you would get if you were doing entering in a new contact from the contact screen. This action that we've triggered from the workflow is still a consistent action that we can get into everywhere. This will be the case regardless of what styles of actions you take. Now again, with these actions, the most obvious of them is launching a template. And again, it links into all the templates you have in the system, even your own custom templates. So just walk through and take a look at what options you have available. Under the Fire Event section, we talked about launching programs and going to websites. But as you start to get deeper and deeper into this, you guys may find the need to provide different tools, like launching your primary estimate. I tend to find this, launching your primary estimate, and opening up QuickBooks are almost always side by side for anybody using the AIA app for payment forms. Once a month, we get to send in that G702 and G703 to the bank for each job. In order to build it, we need to have QuickBooks open, and we need to have our primary estimate open. So again, you could just link it directly to your primary estimate here. The next step would be linking to QuickBooks, put together your progress invoice, pull all that together in G702 and G703. Again, this is available in corporate or Catalyst and above, and all of that information gets pushed out from there. So again, these are some important steps. You may also find in this case that you want a quick and easy way to enter in new tasks for some of your team. I find that this happens pretty often for a lot of people who are working through it, maybe calendar activities for appointments or meetings, or creating a to-do list for something that's happening on the job. This is also a great function too, because as you guys are working through this, there's no limit to the number of times you click the option or trigger the action for the workflow. So if you do need to build a selection, well, this is selection options, but if we're using this to build a to-do list, you could just choose fridge, and then we could click it again, next to do. This one might be for, well, let's call it kitchen tile. And so on. Now what you'll notice in here is that we're also saving a couple of steps by auto-linking into the project. instead of going to the to-do section and just clicking create to-do, create to-do, create to-do, assigning the project every time, this one is going to autofill a lot of that information. Now all we have to remember to do is put in the due date if it applies and related contacts. So all of that information is going to be available to you there. And you can, which part are you pointing at?
Oh yeah, no, I wanted to point out, if you're really trying to be efficient here, you can actually jump in while you're putting this to-do list together and start assigning other people on your team to actually take care of these items as they go. I just wanted to highlight, how efficient this one piece of the platform can be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, the ideas that we're looking at here, all of this information is going to be a review. As I mentioned too, at the end, we have that review estimate versus actuals. Perhaps in this case, we can add that last workflow item that says review workflow. Like most items available in ConstructionSuite, these workflows are designed to be customizable. They're also designed to be refined. Like, you should always have a step at the end of every project where you review how the project went. Review your schedule, try to find ways to not only compress the schedule for your next job, but also kind of refine the steps and make sure that everything makes sense and that we didn't lose time or that we're not using the wrong people. You'll also want to go through and review your estimate. Again, a hugely important step here, estimate versus actuals. You always want to make sure that your estimator is getting everything right. You want to make sure that over the course of the job, you guys don't miss any change orders or forget about any paperwork. This should be a step in your workflow. The reason I add review workflow last is, again, we're always refining the process. I was raised by a military man. He was a warrant officer in the Army, and he beat it into my head, not literally, but he would repeat all the time that a good process is designed to be reviewed and refined. This workflow is a process. And so what you want to do at the end of each of these things is just make sure all the steps make sense. And if there's a step that we missed, some way that we could have potentially lost money or found a problem or something like that, by all means, come in here, add this step, make sure that the workflow is going to improve the next job. The vast majority of these tools are all about our next project. We always want to do better next time than we did this time, even if this time we thought it was perfect. There's always room for improvement, and that's why we should always go through and review and always make sure that these are the final few steps. Now, along those lines, I believe that's most of what we have for you guys today. I expect a lot of questions, or I'm hoping for them. Now, I do see in here, too, where Sydney has actually provided a few of these. She's flagged some of these questions for us to go back through and recap. In the meantime, though, guys, don't forget, that questions panel is open. So go take a look at the questions panel and make sure that if you guys do have anything else you'd like to see, or even just something you'd like me to show you again, that we have the opportunity to go back in there and hit those features. This webinar, this feature, Workflows, is all about making you more successful than you are right now and more successful tomorrow than you were today after using it. So again, in this case, our goal is to provide you these success tools. So let's get those questions out there if you have them, and we'll review them and reach back out to you guys shortly. For now, though, anybody who's happy with what they've seen, who has learned everything that they need to learn about this spectacular feature in the ConstructionSuite system, I want to thank you guys for joining us today, and hopefully we'll be able to see you guys in August as we start our next series of webinars, which I don't know if we have a specific topic for that. I'm sure Holly and Sydney have been putting together some, but let's make sure that we do have a chance to kind of go back through and review some of those things too. For now, though, guys, again, thank you so much for joining us for the webinar today. We'll be fielding questions in just a couple of moments, but until then, guys, and until the next webinar, I want to thank you again for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful night and a wonderful weekend. Take care, everyone.